And this was a bombshell that hit, well, today's Thursday, bombshell that hit today, which is Google has been hit with its second antitrust. Um, a, uh, a federal judge ruled that Google held illegal monopolies on online advertising markets due to its position between ad buyers and sellers. This could have been a headline in 2000. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Silicon Insider podcast. Hi, Scott.
Hello, Mike.
Well, I got a little enthusiastic last week, and we went a little long. So I've made a private promise to the listeners out there that we're going to keep this one really short, so you can get back to work, and so can I, and still cover the high points. Because really, compared to the last few weeks, it's been fairly quiet, except for a few big bumps. And I'll get into those for a second. Stock market, as usual, is going up and down like crazy because no one knows what the heck is going on. But the New York Stock Exchange fell 700 points on Wednesday after Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, at a speech said the level of tariff increases announced so far is significantly larger than anticipated. The same is likely to be true of the economic effects, which will include higher inflation and slower growth. Stock market, boom, tumbled on that one. Needless to say, President Trump immediately hit back and basically said Jerome Powell is always a day late and a dollar short on things, and he should be cutting interest rates. This is one of those occasions where I think it's possible for both sides to be actually guilty. I've long thought that the Fed is way too slow to react on just about everything. And Trump, if he thought this wasn't going to cause, inflation and a slowdown of the economy, this power play he's making on tariffs, he was dreaming. So we're just going to have to live with both, I think, and endure whatever happens.
Well, I mean, you talk about Wednesday. As you and I speak, it's Thursday night, and Thursday was another day of those two clashing. Trump saying, "Oh, I can get rid of Powell," which I don't believe he has the legal.
I don't think he does. No,
he does not. No,
that was the whole point of the Federal Reserve when they created it back in the just after the turn of the century, was to insulate the head of the Federal Reserve from politics.
Right. And so just the fact that there's this back and forth, I think, is one of the reasons that even on Thursday, we saw another 530-point drop in the Dow. And it's this uncertainty and chaos that, that's going on from the White House, emanating from the White House, and investors just do not like it whatsoever.
Do we have any word of what happened last night with the Japanese trade representative coming to Washington? Are there any news coming out? Any conclusions? We've got the Prime Minister of Italy now at the White House. So, I mean, everybody's showing up. I was on the BBC last night, and my counterpart is she's a business editor in Bangladesh, and she said, yeah, our people are going next Tuesday to the White House. I mean, it looks like this giant queue of 150 countries all trying to get to the front of the line to cut a deal before, the deal gets worse. And we haven't seen any real results from it yet.
Correct. And that's the thing. That's what the Trump administration wants you to think, that there's a giant queue of 150 countries. There's not. He was talking on Thursday afternoon about deals that are in the works. And I imagine, with this 90-day pause, we'll see deals. And if there's a deal, especially even hinted at, I think between the United States and China, I think that would be something that would send the stock market shooting higher. But unless and until we get that, everything else feels like a minor deal to get back to where the country was in relation to doing business with another country, because things were pretty smooth for a while there. And now all of a sudden, everything is up in the air.
Yeah. And I think we've said this before, but it's all about China. This was a moment where, yeah, you play the hand and you say everybody's got to cut their tariffs or we're going to raise ours, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, it's China. And we got a glimpse of that this week. This was a big shocker. I mean, what's the hottest company in the world right now? And especially the United States, NVIDIA. And all of a sudden, the White House announced that it was effectively closing off sales of NVIDIA's state of the art, their beast, H2O chip to China. And NVIDIA had to take a loss of $5.5 million, billion dollars.
Billion dollars,
Billion
yeah.
dollars. And AMD is going to have to do the same thing. Basically, we just said, China, you can't have the world's most powerful AI chips.
Well, they're taking a charge on this, both AMD and NVIDIA, and I imagine to a lesser extent other chip companies that are trying to do this. And it really hit their stock prices hard. These tariffs are, I don't know how else to say it, bad for business. And these chip companies, it's interesting because NVIDIA, right on the heels of saying, hey, we're going to take 500 billion and put it in the United States and bring all these chip companies here and workers, and exactly what the Trump administration would want a business to say. Right. And then they took a $200 billion loss the next day in the stock market because of that charge. And I just don't see anyone winning in this tariff thing yet.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. NVIDIA, I just looked up the number for the stock price. They're getting down to $100 again. They're not much above that. And that's when they did that split, which means they literally have not made a gain in terms of their stock price. I mean, they're coming out with great numbers, especially with this H2O chip, but they haven't gained any ground in, hell, a year almost, which is shocking to me for a company doing so well.
Right. I mean, they're back where they were 11 months ago. But come on, they're a company that relies, like so many Silicon Valley tech companies, on doing business overseas. And right now, that's a perilous place to be and an uncertain place to be. And the market doesn't like uncertainty.
Okay, let me get your opinion on this. Is it a good thing that we don't? I mean, given China's history of stealing our technology and maybe even did so with DeepSeek, is it a good thing we don't let China have these cutting edge AI chips?
It's a double-edged sword because on the one hand, right, we keep the technology for ourselves, but it's such a global market, Mike, that if we keep the technology for ourselves and don't sell it to other countries, we're really asking those companies that make and create the technology to take a big step back. And long run, maybe that means more jobs in America. But in the short term, it's costing them a lot of money because so much of the money they make is made in other countries.
Yeah, well, and the other thing is, if you just say no to China on the H2O chip or the AMD chip, but open it up to everywhere else in the world, what immediately happens, as we've seen, is a black market gets created. And they, like Saudi Arabia, they just turn around and sell the chip on, in a box of candy bars to China. And so China gets the chip anyway. I don't see a rational solution to this unless some kind of tariff deal gets straightened out with China. And, that all comes down to one guy, which is Chairman Xi, and he knows what he wants, and no one in China is going to say no to him. Not anymore. So, I mean, there's going to have to be a summit between Trump and Xi. I don't see anything else possible. I don't think any Chinese trade rep, I mean, they're digging their heels in and raising tariffs too. I don't see any resolution until the two top guns get together and work something out.
I agree. And I hate to speculate on anything, given that by the time people listen to this may have already happened. But I think that's what is going to happen. They're going to discuss the tariffs. They're going to discuss TikTok, and at some point come to some sort of an agreement, and then we'll be able to move on from there.
Okay, and finally, and this was a bombshell that hit. Today's Thursday. Bombshell that hit today which is Google has been hit with its second antitrust. Um, a, a federal judge ruled that Google held illegal monopolies on online advertising markets due to its position between ad buyers and sellers. This could have been a headline in 2000 or 2001. I mean, back when I was running a magazine, uh, I went to several meetings about this, and all the magazines in America were bleeding because they turned over their search to Google, and they installed these search engines, and then Google took all the revenues, and the magazines went broke, and I thought, why now? I mean, Google is kind of less of a monopoly comparatively than I think it was in 2005, 2010, 2015. I mean, why go after him now? And there's two of them, right? There's a second antitrust that we talked about last September in Virginia. I'm not sure where this one is, DC. Anyway, Google's getting hit twice. And what do you think? I mean, obviously this thing's going to be appealed to the end of time, but is Google in trouble?
Well, I mean, you said it twice in 1 year. These have been charges that have been dogging Google for a long time. You've had an aggressive government agency going after these guys. And think about what's going on right now as well, the Meta antitrust trial, the Meta trial. And, their Meta is also saying, no, all these other companies are competing against us, and Instagram and WhatsApp and all that. And I think you're seeing an aggressive, we've seen an aggressive FTC. We've seen more aggressive antitrust regulators go after these big tech companies. This has been something we've been waiting to see for some time. And it's interesting because we have to figure out how the relationship between the ads, buyers and sellers and stuff that this week's decision on Google, how that affects, the average person, you and I, when we search and what we see. But so much of what we see is determined by those advertising dollars. And obviously the size and scope of these companies are determined by the money that comes in because of these ad revenues and because of these, what the government would like to think are monopolies. And so I think this bodes well for the consumer, well for small businesses that have been unable to make a dent in these markets because of the size of these giant tech companies.
Right.
But for the companies themselves, they may have to adjust. I don't know if we're going to see a day where, Google will have to spin off Chrome, or if, Meta will have to spin off Instagram and or WhatsApp. But we're getting a little closer. And I think maybe this will benefit competition and small business in a way that we haven't seen in a couple of decades.
Right. I mean, there's two counter arguments. One of them is these companies are so big and valuable to the United States in terms of balance and trade and all of that, that you want to hesitate before breaking them up. And yet, me, I'm Mr. Entrepreneur. I mean, I love small businesses and the creation of new companies. And these guys have been a blanket on the top of entrepreneurship in electronics, especially Silicon Valley, for 20 years. And finally, we had the example of big giant companies getting broken up and they become actually more productive.
I mean,
some of their weak spots get exposed and destroyed, but their strength is oftentimes enhanced by breaking them up.
I agree. I mean, the business history is littered with acquisitions that have gone wrong. But breakups tend to do well for all involved.
Right.
There's often a spin-off, maybe another company gets to go public, more value for shareholders, more value for competitors, more chances to get innovation. Breakups tend to go pretty well in this country. And so it'll be interesting to see if any of these, because it's been a while since we've had ones, but even spin-offs, which we have had recently, tend to create value and often innovation. And those are two good things.
And, frankly, I'm starting to, it's hard to believe, but I'm starting to agree with AOC. I'm getting tired of these oligarchs. I really am. I mean, if they
Sure.
were, if if they were doing their foundations like traditional, Andrew Carnegie or one of those guys creating a foundation and building libraries, but sending pop stars into space and it's like, please, do we really need this? I mean, it seems like it's destructive to the morale and the morality of society.
I mean, right. Competition is good. And even big companies. I mean, another thing we've seen as you and I talk on Thursday night, Netflix reported as we speak, their earnings were huge. Their stock is soaring. This is an area where the consumer has a lot of choices. Think of all the streaming services that are out there.
Love it.
And they push each other and they compete with each other and they make each other better. And Netflix is just the gold standard again. But that doesn't mean you can't have another streaming service. We have plenty of choices to the point where some of us are, spending a lot of money on streaming services. But the idea that you can still create innovation and value and good shows because these guys are all competing with each other is impressive.
Is Netflix sort of like Hollywood in the 30s? It's a counter indicator that, when people don't have a whole lot of money to go out, they stay home and, Netflix it.
Yes, I think
that suggests maybe our economy is actually in worse shape than we know.
This could be an indicator. You're right, Mike. I mean, in 2008, when everything was getting just keel-hauled in Silicon Valley, Netflix was one of those things that was okay because assuming you still had a home or a place to live in 2008, your stocks were going down, jobs were scarce, but Netflix did well because it was a relatively inexpensive way to get entertainment. And I wonder if two things are at play with Netflix's earnings that we're watching tonight and watching the stock price go up. One, they're just flat out beating expectations, which is always good. But two, people are saying, is there, and they've been asking this question, I think, for a few weeks now, is there a stock that is recession proof in today's economy? Hard to find because so much of the business is done globally, but Netflix may be one because of what you just said.
Okay. Finally, see, I'm cutting it short. An interesting comment came out just the other day. I noticed it, that NVIDIA may have a new competitor. I mean, we've been thinking about who's going to compete with NVIDIA because it's going so fast. But what about an end run? And that would be amazingly Amazon. That Amazon Web Services, the cloud, they think they've found a way to reproduce the effect of AI using the cloud, their cloud operation, as opposed to forcing companies to buy chips and that sort of thing. And they think they can do it for like a tenth the price or something like that. I mean, it was astounding. I read it and I thought, good Lord, we've been waiting to see who's going to be the NVIDIA killer. I didn't have Amazon anywhere on my bucket list. So, I mean, keep an eye on Amazon, because if they come out with a really powerful cloud service that says, we'll do your AI for you, that's going to be interesting. That's going to change.
Isn't part of NVIDIA's success and the chip company's success in the modern era because they make these chips to power these cloud service, I don't know, stations?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. I mean,
the servers.
Would NVIDIA allow Amazon to buy their H2O chips to power an Amazon killer service? That could be fun to watch.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard to kill the chip companies because if they've always been resilient through ups and downs because
they're the top of the food pyramid. Let's face it, always.
Well, or even more importantly, the bottom of the pyramid, right, where they are the base, sort of the base that everything else builds on.
It builds upon, yes.
Yeah, and so if you want to say, hey, my cloud server business is going to be super powerful, what do you need to power that cloud service? And those servers, you're going to need powerful chips, right?
You're probably going to buy AMD chips if it comes down to that.
That's possible.
We'll see. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're done. Ray, no, you're going to have to cut your run short, and various people around the world who time themselves, we understand, on the length of the show. We're cutting it short today. I'm not even going to tell you where you can find us because you already know. I'll just say goodbye and see you later too, Scott.